As India celebrates 68 years of independence, the iconic Red Fort that has witnessed the history of our country in the making bore testimony to yet another new chapter in India's history. Prime Minister Narendra Modi delivered his much-anticipated maiden Independence Day speech extempore, which is a first since Jawaharlal Nehru. But has the speech delivered on the mountain of expectations? And is there a clear roadmap that has finally been laid out by the Prime Minister from the Red Fort? A very special panel joins me on the special show, Modi's Ideas, and we've got Jayant Sinha of the BJP, BK Chaturvedi, former Cabinet Secretary, Sidharth Birla, President FICCI, and Bibek, Debroy, Professor at the Centre of Policy Research. I'm Supriya, Shrinate, and straight on to what the Prime Minister has said. Mr. Sinha, because you represent the ruling party, I have to start with you. A lot of expectations around Prime Minister Narendra Modi's speech, a very courageous attempt to make that speech extempore. He also struck a conciliatory note. The question is, did it lack the details that one was expecting it to have?
No, I think we should not expect the Prime Minister to be laying out details from the ramparts of Red Fort. I think he has to sketch out a vision and he has to inspire the nation, which is what I think he did very, very well today. I think, it is always better for him to speak extempore because he's such a brilliant orator and he has a natural flow. If he was reading from a text, he would lose that natural flow, but because he spoke extempore, because he was in his natural flow, he was able to sketch out a vision of how he thinks about India. And in doing so, not only did he give us a chance to understand what the new India will be like in terms of his own thinking, he also elevated himself, I think, to not just being, one of India's great prime ministers, which is what I think he will be, but truly to be a global statesman as well, because he talked again and again about 125 crore Indians. So he was saying that he's everybody's prime minister. He talked about being a Pradhan Sevak, to be the servant of the people, not to be the ruler of the people, and therefore really sort of set for everybody a role model and an example of how we should conduct ourselves in public life and how we should represent India. And in that sense, he really, I think, is rapidly acquiring a statesman-like status, which I think will be great for the country domestically as well as great for the country overall. So I think in that sense, it was exactly right, the tone that he set and the manner in which he described the new programs, which is at a statesman level and at a level that was inspirational for India.
All right, inspirational, statesman-like. Professor Debroy, I'm going to throw this question to you. Should we have expected the speech to be grand? Much like Jayant is defending it, it did lack the details because there was this expectation. The budget was short on details. It will be really Narendra Modi's big bang blockbuster speech that will lay out the roadmap. Again, that hasn't happened. Would you agree with me that the concrete roadmap is still missing? It's great on vision, but again, I'll go back to saying it still lacks the vision. This was his big opportunity.
Well, I largely agree with Jayant, and I think the question to ask is, what do we expect the speech to be, and who is the speech directed at? This speech is directed at all of India. It's not just directed to the likes of us who are going to sit here in TV panels and dissect it. And the purport of this speech is to instill a sense of pride in the country, in the future of the country. So I think it would be unrealistic to expect concrete plans, programs in the speech. The moment you have a speech, whether it is extempore or not, there are always some things which will be included and some things will be excluded. I think there are 5 or 6 elements in this speech which obviously reflect his sense of priorities, whether it is women, whether it is government servants, whether it is sanitation, whether it is skills, whether it is manufacturing, or whether it is safety and security. Within that, there are of course specific elements if one is looking for specific elements, which is the Planning Commission, which is the financial inclusion. But yes, indeed, I do agree with you right at the end, which is the bottom line, that what now needs to be seen is how is this going to be translated into future action, how is this going to be implemented. But like I said, I don't expect those details in the 15th August speech.
All right, the 15th August speech is not meant for audience in the studios, like Professor Debroy said, but I'm itching to ask the question that you gave me a cue to, and that is the Planning Commission that's pertinent to our audience, our constituency. There's been so much written and said about the recast of the plan panel. Mr. Birla, my question is really to you. it's finally official. The Prime Minister has said there is going to be a recast. It may also be re-Christian. It is going to have a very separate set of functions than it does now. Perhaps more monitoring will happen, perhaps more forecasting will happen, but it will be very, very different from what the present plan panel is, which has been at the receiving end of many economists being called armchair economists in that plan panel. As a member of the India Inc., do you welcome that move? And why do you think that's so important?
I think he gave the answer when he made the announcement, is that something that was right at a point of time, so he didn't decry the Planning Commission per se, but one has to look at the times you're in and what is the solution you're looking for. So really speaking, do you really need a Planning Commission at the center to plan out every aspect of our economy? I think we have to be quick on our feet, and therefore adaptation of plans, very great amount of flexibility and very rigid monitoring and making sure that we stay the course that we have decided is probably the need of the hour. Now, how that Planning Commission will be recast, re-Christianed has to be, and I'm sure he has a model in his mind. Because coming back, exactly, even I was on a debate last night, and I said, from the ramparts of the 15th, from the ramparts of the Red Fort, you don't expect a speech which would be made inside, let's say, a working group. And I am pretty sure that the Prime Minister, when he says something, he knows what he's doing and what he plans to do. So nothing that was said was in the abstract. I think there is a backup for everything. There is a messaging. It was the messaging today to the people at large. And I would say that the concept of moving with the times and adapting to the times is the central message.
All right, moving with the times, and that's a very pertinent point that I want to throw to Mr. Chaturvedi here. You've been at the Planning Commission. Will you agree with Mr. Birla that it has outlived its relevance? And that's exactly what the Prime Minister also referred to. When it was created, it was a relevant institution. It has outlived its relevance. What does the Plan Panel really need to do, or what do you think the government should be doing with the Plan Panel to make it more relevant to our times, to make it in sync with what his broader economic vision really is?
Well, you see, the problem is that all institutions of governance which were started about 70 years back have to be reviewed, and to that extent the plan panel's reforms were very much overdue. The economies have changed enormously. Now we have far more private investments, more than 80%, 85% as against 50% in the 1950s. So really you can't really have a centralized plan in that sense. But there are areas which need to be addressed, and that the plan panel, I hope that the restructured panel which is thinking doesn't really remain only a think tank. To that I have serious reservations. Think tanks really would be yet another ideas floating and no one will be implementing. But in case the panel can undertake a few things, A, it can undertake the monitoring and the implementation and evaluation of the schemes being undertaken. B, the focus on the investments in different sectors, particularly in the social sectors, which now in the reformed area this is important. C, in the area of private investment and public-private partnership in case it can expand. And D, it can undertake a coordinating role amongst various ministries, which it is very well equipped to do. In case it can undertake many of these things, along with the preparation of the plan in the short-term perspective and in the medium-term perspective, I think it would be doing a fine job. The fact remains that the states have to be given more powers now to implement policies which they feel are in the interest of their people, and this is very much, I find, a part of this budget which was started. This initiative was started earlier. It's part of this budget, but I think this has to be further, process has to be strengthened. I must make a last point that this is one institution which is an institution of, in a federal structure of governance, where states come to them for discussion, in fact, as they say, crying on the shoulders. There is no other institution. The Interstate Council, unfortunately, is not the body. So in case we are going to abolish it, then I think we are going to weaken the federal structure. How we are thinking of replacing it, how we are thinking of meeting this requirement, because the Prime Minister has been talking of strengthening the states, I'm not so sure. That has really not come out very much in the speech or so far in the policy pronouncements. I'm sure that this must be within their mind and they would be working in this area.
I'm certain also, because he keeps talking about cooperative federalism, and it cannot happen if he doesn't get the states on board as far as the plan panel is concerned. One man who may have an inkling of this is Mr. Sinha on our panel here. Please do share your thoughts with us. How does this plan panel, I know you would not want to talk specifics just yet, but how would the states still be kept in the loop as far as this broad plan panel is concerned? A new body, a new think tank, Vision 2020 that everybody's spoken about. How do they go about this?
Well, right now, as you know, the other speakers have pointed out, the Planning Commission has outlived its usefulness. And in fact, what we've seen is a massive scope creep, even for the way the original Planning Commission was intended to work, you know, in Pandit Nehru's time. We have a situation now where the Planning Commission is working both as a funding agency, as a planning agency. It's also working in terms of monitoring delivery of certain types of programs. And it's also generating knowledge and issuing reports and so on. So it's had this massive scope creep, and it's doing all of these different things. I think as far as its funding powers are concerned, those can usefully be sent over to the Finance Commission when it comes to the allocation of funds to different states. The union ministries, I think, can work directly with the Finance Ministry, where potentially there can be a department set up to just handle the requests from the union ministries in terms of their funding. So I think the funding functions of the Planning Commission can usefully be taken out. I don't think it really should be a think tank. I think we've got lots of good think tanks in India and around the world where, you know, world-class researchers can build a career, can do world-class research and so on. I'm not sure that the Planning Commission is the right place to do that type of research and knowledge generation. Now, all that being said, I think that there is a very important role for the Planning Commission, or whatever the new institute is going to be called, because the new institute will sit right next to the Prime Minister, and as a result of that, and of course it has traditionally reported to the Prime Minister has been the chairman of the Planning Commission or the new institute, and because of the proximity to the PMO, because of the fact that this institute is going to be across ministries and across states, it does have a very powerful and important role to play, particularly in delivery and execution. So my own personal view would be that if you can take this institute and really focus it on 4 or 5 or 6 major priorities, missions, you know, like the one that we talked about as Jan Dhan Yojana, which is a financial inclusion mission, for example, which cuts across many ministries, which has to be implemented across states, then this institute, working with the Prime Minister, can ensure execution and delivery of these kinds of very, very important national priorities that are much too vast for a single ministry or just for a state to tackle. So I think that could be a very useful, valuable role for the Planning Commission to take on.
All right, whatever the new commission will be called and whatever its role will be, one thing is for certain, members in that commission can no longer be called armchair economists. On that note, I'm going to take my first break here on the show. We come back and discuss the new slogan that the Prime Minister has announced today, Come, Make in India. Great to be back with you once again on this very special edition. We are discussing and getting perspective on the Prime Minister's maiden Independence Day speech. I want to kick off this segment with Professor Debroy. Professor Debroy, the Prime Minister has given a new slogan to the country, Come Make in India, and he's actually told the world out there that he's very serious about making India a manufacturing hub. The question is this slogan enough to attract domestic and foreign investors to start coming in and start manufacturing in India?
A slogan is not enough. A slogan is no more than that. It's just a slogan. And such slogans have been used in other countries also, including the US. I think the problems that plague manufacturing in India are also sufficiently well known. They have to do with infrastructure, particularly roads and power, a little bit on indirect taxes, interest rates, procedures, land, forest, environment. Now, obviously, all of these need to be licked into shape before manufacturing in India as a share of GDP goes up, and before investments, not just foreign, also domestic, begin to happen. But I think a slogan is always useful to focus one's attention and to drive home the point that India is not just a consumer market, it is also a place from which sourcing can happen, the kind of thing that happened in China historically and in other parts of Southeast Asia also historically.
Fair point indeed. The slogan just perhaps puts across the point that the Prime Minister would want to. But Mr. Sinha, if I may come to you, it's all very good to say that we want to manufacture here in India. We want the global guys to come in, start making their stuff here in India, export to the world, make this a manufacturing hub. The question, though, is that labour and land reforms, some of the biggest hurdles to manufacturing in India, continue to haunt India Inc. And in the last 2 months, if we've seen, your government is rather pro-poor. The stance is very, very pro-poor. One thought it's going to be very pro-industry. It's going to come back with a magic wand. That hasn't happened. It's still very pro-poor. It's catering to its core constituency, which is the poor Indians. The question is, how are you going to convince India Inc. to put their money in, start making here, or actually asking the global guys to come in?
Well, I don't agree with that assertion at all. First of all, there is no trade-off between working on behalf of industry and business and helping the poor. In fact, that is very much the right way to do it, which is to work for both sections of the economy. And in fact, the Honorable Finance Minister in Parliament twice said, which I thought was a very profound and important statement, where he said that we are a pro-business party. And then he went on to say that we are also a pro-poor party. And actually there is no trade-off there, as I've said just earlier, because if indeed business grows, if indeed industry grows, if indeed we deal with our current account deficit, we stop importing as many goods as we are right now, particularly in electronics, then we will of course be able to generate the economic surplus within the economy through tax revenues and through wealth creation and so on, so that we can in fact help the poor even better, and we will have the resources to be able to help them. So there is no contradiction here. I think it makes perfect sense. I think what is very important in the Made in India and Come and Make Here slogans that the Prime Minister laid out today is that we are really seeing a roadmap for a very different kind of set of economic policies and a very different worldview from what we've seen with the UPA, and in fact which was the Nehruvian socialist worldview. We are seeing, I think, what is really going to be a veritable supply side revolution, which to some extent was already started in the 98 to 2004 NDA period, when that NDA government worked very hard to build India's infrastructure and India's productive capacity. I think what the Prime Minister laid out today, and was also, I think, clearly articulated in the budget, is that we are really going to work towards building India's productive capacity. It's a supply side revolution. We'll have good infrastructure, good manufacturing, we'll build the skills of Indians, we'll work on housing, we'll work on all these sectors of the economy that build India's capacity to be a great exporter, to be able to serve the poor. And that was the roadmap, that was the vision that was very clear today in Prime Minister Modi's speech.
I want to take this across to the India Inc. representative on this panel, because the Prime Minister made a very candid admission that he came to New Delhi as an outsider and he realized how much infighting there was in government departments. There was such a tug of war amongst various ministries. People vouch for one thing, that Mr. Modi will bring about administrative efficiency in the system. Is that enough? And how much of a comfort factor that is when you invest in, say, something like manufacturing, Mr. Birla?
I think it's a very good beginning and a prerequisite. I wouldn't say it is enough, but you know, it is a prerequisite. And I think he's gone about it the right way of packaging ministries, not under just specific individuals, but by function. And therefore, we will probably see more of it as time goes on. And I think it was a very positive thing to do. And I think we've covered the first quarter of a mile in a 1 mile race, really speaking. And now coming back to very quickly, because it all links together, the Make in India, I have almost nothing to add to what Shri Jayant Sinha said and Professor Debroy said. But really speaking, it's you know, it's a marvelous packaging, Make in India. Now, a slogan is not the only thing that's going to work. You know, it's the profitability of being in a place and the ease of doing business in a place and the certainty that you want to be there for the next 20 years is what is going to drive the investment and bring people here. So if you're listening to the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister is sort of making an open invitation that come and make in India, you have to assume that the rest of the things which follow are going to get done. Number two, when he said Make in India, it is not only for global people to come here. He's actually encouraged the youth to literally, I mean, go around and look at the marketplace and see if there's something imported which you can make here. And he also added that fantastic thing of zero defect, that, you know, if you make something, make sure that none of it comes back. So how do we move towards this zero defect, which is a high quality manufacturing? So he's actually exhorting not only the foreigners, but he's exhorting the Indians and anybody who cares to listen, that Make in India. So I can make my products entirely for the domestic market and still have it Make in India. So he's driving investment, jobs, manufacturing across the range with that one slogan.
All right, Mr. Chaturvedi, if I may come to you, and one of the grander visions that have been spoken about in the past and was reiterated today is financial inclusion, a bank account for every Indian. The question is that, you know, doubts have been raised in the past about this mode of financial inclusion. Is this forced? Is this the right way to go forward? Does this put the banking system under undue pressure, which is in any case under pressure because of the slowdown in the economy? Most experts have voiced concern on that front. Do you believe there are lessons to be learned for the establishment before they actually go ahead and push this kind of financial inclusion?
Well, before I come to that, may a quick comment on this Make in India. I agree with Professor Debroy that it is not, the slogan has to be backed by concrete action plan, the question of infrastructure, the question of governance. You see the ease of doing business, World Bank study, India is around somewhere around 130th. So unless we are able to do that, and most of it lies in the states, so there is no detailing of this plan, and we may keep on saying it because as Chief Minister he did very well in Gujarat, but now this is up to the Chief Ministers of the states. So unless they are on board, unless they do things in this regard, I'm afraid we would not be able to move forward very much. But as a starting point, this is superb. A second point on the financial inclusion, I do feel that it is feasible because now the financial inclusion need not be only through the process of opening of banks. We can use the process of mobile banking, and we have the bank correspondents. They can be used. So it is possible now with the small amounts of investments to expand the banking sector to most of the countrymen, and I think it is a superb idea. This gives pride to the people in themselves that they have a bank account. It gives them an identity, and it gives them a feeling, even if they have 100 rupees, yes, they have 100 rupees. I think this is an excellent idea, and we must move forward. We had thought of this financial inclusion earlier,
right,
with Nandan Nilekani's Aadhaar platform. I think we can move on this platform. This is an idea worth doing, and it can be done.
All right, an idea whose time has come, if I may, but I have time for just two very brief, quick answers, and I have to take these. Professor Debroy, I'm going to come to you. Away from the economy and away from the financial inclusion, the Prime Minister did speak about communal harmony. He did speak about inclusion. He's at ease now in New Delhi. That's clearly the body language. The question is, what does he do with these elements that keep talking about a Hindu Rashtra?
No, I don't think, you see, something should not be blown out of all proportion. And I think I would highlight something that he said right at the beginning. Let us not continuously ask what the government is going to do, what the Prime Minister is going to do. I think there's a little bit for us also to look inwards. And some of this should be interpreted in that spirit, that what are we going to do? And for me, the bottom line is, have I watched an Independence Day speech by a Prime Minister after a very, very long time? The answer is yes. Have I seen several people there staying awake and not going off to sleep? The answer is yes. I think that is the most important message I would draw from this speech.
That's an important lesson. Each one of us woke up at 7:30 to catch that speech, and I think that's the benchmark of the success of a speech. But I'll let Jayant Sinha on the show have the last word. And Mr. Sinha, he spoke about decision-making by sehmati and not bahumat, not majority, but actually consensus. Is that a crucial lesson learned? And is that also the pressure on the government? It's a majority government, it's got 283 MPs, but the decision-making in Parliament cannot happen with numbers alone. There is political consensus that is required. Is that a lesson learned after this budget session?
I wouldn't say it's a lesson learned. I think it's an operating practice that we have put in place, and you saw that with the National Judicial Commission bill, which was passed unanimously in both houses of Parliament, and I think it was a real triumph for us in terms of how we were able to build a consensus and overcome any disagreements that members in either house might have had. So I think it was a very important aspect of how we want to operate the government. I think that's what the Prime Minister also emphasized in his speech. And I think, particularly for very important issues that can be contentious, issues that can be controversial, it's very important to have the broad support of all stakeholders, the people of India, the members of Parliament and so on, so that we can move forward in a way that is consensual and that takes everyone along with us. And it comes back again to what I was saying earlier, is that, the Prime Minister, with his actions and his words, is really elevating himself to the person that is serving all 125 crore Indians, and is therefore acquiring, I think, an extraordinary reputation as a statesperson himself.
Gentlemen, we've completely run out of time here. Thanks each one of you for being with us on this very special edition. Prime Minister Modi's first Independence Day speech. It's his date with Red Fort that has seen a new chapter unveil in India's history. We leave you with visuals of 68 years of Indian independence.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/etnow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at etnowlive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/etnow.